just in terms of why Laurie's book and why we're all here. As saying to Laurie before, I came across Laurie probably about 6 years ago when I was working in HR tech, and I think everyone in the marketing team loved Laurie's content because she was no bullshit and got to the point and added some value, and it was just quite refreshing when everyone else just says lots of stuff and we're not really sure what that stuff means. So we really loved it, love Laurie for that reason and her content. And when she released her book last year, I remember reading it one weekend before lockdown, and I was sat on a beach somewhere when we were allowed to do all those things before we knew that COVID was going to affect our lives in the way it has. And just absolutely loved it because it was, for me, felt like I was having a conversation with someone, but someone that was going to keep me really accountable and just were like, no, stop it, don't do that. And it was everything I needed to read at the time, but it was also one of those that I knew that I'd probably have to reread when I was having the next career crisis and not knowing what to do. So when we had the idea of Strivin Book Club, it felt like the perfect book to kick off with. One, because it's January and I'm sure we've all, questioned our lives over Christmas when we've had some time off and spent it with loved ones, but also just because everything we've been through in the last couple of years, I feel like there's lots of us just really asking questions. And for me, Laurie's book helped me personally with a lot of that. And I think from some of the feedback I've had in emails, other people seem to share that sentiment. So that's why we're all here. So big thank you to Laurie for actually coming along, because that was huge when she said yes. I was very nervous about sending that email. And then everybody else that's come along and read the book, really appreciate it. It's great to have that support from everybody. So thank you. Just checking. Yeah, no, all good. I had a message from Laura and I thought, oh, she's going to tell me no one's heard us and we've just talked to ourselves for a while, but no, it's all good. Okay, so question wise, I did say that I was going to hand straight over to Lorna because Lorna has plenty of questions ready to go. So let me just unmute Lorna and we can go from there if I can work out how to do this. There we go. Lorna, you should now be unmuted. No, not working.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi.
Excellent. Turns out I just needed to click the unmute button. Who knew?
Not mine. Thank you.
Apologies. Hi, Laurie. Just to echo Laura's sentiment, I was part of that marketing team that she spoke about before, and we've basically been fangirling ever since. So yeah, I attended a presentation from you in New Zealand, and was just so inspired again by, like Laura said, by your sort of no bullshit approach, and very funny actually. You're just very entertaining. So thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to read your book and hear from you today. I do have a question that's very specific, so apologies for kind of jumping into some very specific details, but one of the points that I really took from your book was around mentorship and the importance of finding a mentor, and working really closely with someone that you respect and appreciate their opinions on. What's your take on kind of formal mentorship programs within the workplace? So I've seen a couple of times where organizations have tried to launch like a mentorship scheme and get people encouraged to kind of get involved and be your mentor and be a mentee. But often you'll have the same people volunteering to do it, right? So you'll have the same people who want to be the mentor in particular. And so you're kind of hearing from those same people. And again, in your book, you made the point that very few men will want to mentor women. So what's your take on it? Like, is it a good thing to do? How can you kind of get the most out of it and really encourage the most people to get involved to kind of get some value from it?
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. And boy, I had such a lovely time in New Zealand as well. So anytime the world is normal again and I can get back, I will be back. My husband insists on it. So hopefully we'll see one another again. But to your question about mentorship, boy, if companies could do anything right, the world would be different. But so often organizations start out with good intentions and then work gets in the way of those intentions. So for anybody out there who's looking for work to offer a really great mentorship program, you're probably going to be waiting for a very long time unless you do it, you organize it yourself, and you think about it in a different way. So the way I would see corporate mentorship programs moving forward, especially in the age of COVID, is to be less formal and to be mandatory for all leaders, because when you're a leader, you are a mentor. I would mandate that in my organization. I would say, you got your day job, but by the way, you've got to talk to somebody in a different department, in a different unit within the organization, of a different age group, of a different identification classification. It's mandatory, one person a quarter, right? Or whatever. But I would think differently about the whole experience. So if you're in a position right now where you're looking for a mentor, it's difficult. People are very, very busy. They're tired. A lot of mentors are trying to present an organized way of looking at the world, and then behind the scenes, they're messy as well. And so go gentle, be easy, and lower your expectations on mentorship right now, just like we should lower our expectations around everything. Be human, be kind, seek out people you think you can learn from, but give them some grace. And if you're in a position to mentor and you've never done it, I don't know what the hell you're waiting for, right? I mean, this generation needs your insight, needs your wisdom. So I just think it's upon all of us to rethink this whole paradigm and do things differently. And isn't that what the pandemic is all about anyway, whether we're talking about mentorship or pay or learning and development, whatever it is, the way we used to do things was clearly broken. That's why we're all messed up and struggling right now. So take this opportunity and do a 180 and try something different. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of my general take on all of this.
Yeah, it definitely did. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think just kind of taking the bull by the horns from a personal perspective, but also probably being part of that change within a business. So if it's something that you think needs to happen within your business or with any business that you work within, be the person who drives that change. Yeah, it's a really strong message. I also just wanted to say while I'm here that I loved your point about dressing like you're going to lunch with Oprah if you're going to an interview, because I just think that's so spot on, because it can apply to whoever you are as a person and as a character. It doesn't need to be a suit.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. I appreciate you echoing that. So for those of you who don't remember that part of the book or haven't quite gotten to that point, I make a recommendation not to go out and buy a new suit for an interview. Just dress as if you were going to lunch with Oprah or going to tea with Oprah. And the thing about Oprah is that she likes style, but she's not ostentatious, and she likes a good deal. So you could shop at like TK Maxx or, any place, that's sensible. Do that and don't spend a fortune on your outfit. So yeah.
Love that.
Love that. Thank you, Lorna. Laura is going to ask the next question if I work out how to take her off mute.
I've taken myself off mute. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, I would like to echo also what Lorna has said. I don't think I can articulate it quite as well as both Lorna and Laura have said, but I'm only actually about halfway through your book, but it's kicking my ass in a good way. So thank you. It's really, really great. I've got heaps of questions, but actually there's one main question that I wanted to ask you about, and it's probably it kind of speaks to me a little bit personally as well. There's kind of early on you talk about doing a pre-mortem and sort of writing down your fears and failures and things and addressing them head on before you kind of go into something. But I could pretend it's a friend, but it's not. It's me. I know there's people in the world that actually, sometimes get frozen by a fear of failure, and sometimes actually facing those fears head on can be something that kind of stops you and makes you stand still. So for those people, how do you advise you kind of go about that pre-mortem, and yeah, what advice would you have to those people, aka me?
Well, you're right. There are people in this world who are so afraid of something, public speaking, the actual act of failure, whatever it is, that it stops them from taking a risk. It stops them from doing the work internally to get to the other side of that. And there's no real advice. There's no fix for that. I think we all have moments in our lives, these inflection points where we just can no longer stand what we're doing and we have to find another way. And in that moment, if you are so sick of failing that you refuse to freeze up, that's going to be the moment that takes you forward. But nobody can get you there. There are no tricks, there are no hacks. It's just something that emerges organically, maybe through maturity, maybe through being fed up. But if there were an easy way to face your fear of failure, you would have done it already. So be patient with yourself, go easy, and maybe you can use the pre-mortem as a way to explore your fear of failure or your fear of even looking at failure. What does it feel like to freeze up? What does it feel like to panic? What happens in those moments? Can you be mindful about it? Can you explore it from a different angle? That's how I would look at things, maybe slightly differently. But there's no getting around failure. There's no getting around grief. There's no getting around trauma. There's only getting through it. So you either get through it now or you get through it later. But at some point, if you want to survive and thrive in this world, you've got to face the things that are difficult for you. And I think, boy, had I learned that earlier in my life and earlier in my career, not that things are terrible today, they're quite lovely today, but they may be completely different. So I would just encourage everybody to, who's avoidant, naturally avoidant like I am and like you are as well, to maybe take a different perspective, a different view, and maybe just ask yourself, okay, I'm scared of freezing up, I'm scared of failing. What am I actually scared of? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? Use your senses, use your language, and do some writing that way and prepare yourself then to do the pre-mortem. But goodness, I don't want you to do anything that makes you feel terrible. So if you never did it, if you skip the pre-mortem entirely, I would be okay with that.
Yeah, I think just to kind of build on that, I think there's also kind of accepting that failure is going to happen, isn't there, as well, and kind of being comfortable with that. So there's probably a balance where, you know, of doing a pre-mortem, and for people like me that might try to overplan, actually just saying, look, these are all the things that might go wrong, but be comfortable with that. I think that's what I kind of tried to take from that section of the book.
Well, I love that. And if I can expand on that, for those that don't know what the pre-mortem is, the pre-mortem is just a very simple exercise where before you do anything in this world, you set a timer. So you have a self-contained amount of time so you don't spiral, whether it's 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 120 seconds, I don't really care. Set that timer and write down all the ways the thing you're about to do will fail. Not might fail, not could fail, but will fail. So for example, if you're interviewing for a role, how will that fail? Well, we have all been on interviews where we have blown it, right? We're too sweaty, or we don't make good eye contact, or we can't tell a very good story. So write it down, the good, the bad, the ugly, the silly, the irreverent. You know, you're worried about your breath, you're worried that you may stumble over your words, whatever it is, write it all down. Because when that timer goes up, you've given yourself a gift. It's a roadmap to success. Because if you start to tick off the list and do the things you need to do to overcome those failures, you give yourself a greater chance of success by over 30%. It's a competitive advantage that NASA uses, Cisco, IBM, Deloitte, the big accounting firms. People and organizations do the pre-mortem because they know that failure is inevitable and they want to make space to fail in new and more interesting ways, not the same stupid way over and over again. So in that way, the pre-mortem could be small, it could be very gentle, or it could be big and expansive, as if you're building a bridge and you want to avoid the bridge collapsing. So the more you practice the pre-mortem, the better you get at it, the less serious, you know, it wounds you when you discover failure. But for me, the thing I love about the pre-mortem is doing it in a group. So when I worked in human resources, what I wouldn't give to go back in time and do a pre-mortem to figure out, you know, the details of rolling out a new benefit to the organization. How is that going to fail? Well, someone's not going to listen right. They're going to miss a deadline. We know it's going to be Gary. Gary misses everything, you know, never gets the email. Had I only thought through failure before launching a new website or, you know, launching, you know, a new program within human resources, I would have been so much more successful. And so that's why I love the flexibility of the pre-mortem. And I think if you don't take it so seriously and you can do it collaboratively, it can be a gift.
I love that. So Mitch has sent in a couple of questions. One of them is a big question, so just putting that out there. He's asked, why do you think that work is so broken?
Oh my God, I wish I were back in university. I'd be working on my PhD to fix that. Mitch, I'm curious why you think work is broken. I mean, for me, I mean, the world is broken. We are a civilization built on, institutional racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism. We discriminate against veterans, against people who are currently looking for work. We have bias in our DNA. Like the world is messed up. And so one of my core philosophies, and this is actually a Buddhist philosophy, that you don't try to fix the world, you fix yourself. And by working on yourself, you make an impact in the world. And so I believe that we fix the world of work by fixing ourselves first. Whatever is broken in our own employment experience, focus on that, try to fix that, and it has a positive downstream effect for everybody else. So in that way, I mean, the answers are big to that big question, but the answers can be small. Whatever is broken at work for you should be your priority for fixing.
I think that's a really great summary. So well done on answering a big question.
Did I get my PhD from that? I don't know.
Really succinct answer to such a big question. Then the other question you asked is, and it kind of links to something I've got written down for later as well, but how do you actually break free from the standard working model to realize your potential?
These questions are lovely. They're so philosophical. So how do you break free from this current model to unleash your potential? Yeah. I think whether you're working in a model or not, you have potential. And I think it's false to assume that you have to break free from the 9-to-5 to unleash your potential. Like, that's a false construct. There are plenty of people who work a 9-to-5 or a 9-to-9 or work 2 jobs and find a way to be creative, to be loving, to make a contribution to the world. And you don't have to do something grand in this world. In fact, my book is all about these small things, these small movements, these small changes that people make to live a richer and more fulfilling life. And by living a richer and more fulfilling life outside of work, even if it's just 30 minutes or an hour outside of work that you love and you cherish, you bring that good energy back into the workforce and you make changes for yourself and for other people. So, I mean, yeah, you want to learn how to break out of a 9-to-5 job, save your money, invest well, work really hard, and then quit. But a lot of times, and I coach these individuals, they go on sabbatical and they spend the first 90 days going, who am I? Why am I here? Laying in bed, not accomplishing anything. If you give me someone who's working hard, but you tell them, okay, you've got a goal right in front of you, but you still have to work your 9-to-5, but you can have a little extra time to train as a yoga teacher, or take some extra time to spend time with your family, they seem to appreciate it because of the pressure. So I think sometimes that 9-to-5 working model can be a good thing to force creativity. I don't know. I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but I like it. I like the question.
Big, deep questions from Mitch. I guess on that, and kind of with the whole 9-to-5 and working from home, because I guess things have changed obviously since we're all at home all the time.
For sure.
Talk a lot about self-care, and like you've just touched on there, like spending time with loved ones and people that you love. How do you set up your structures to keep your boundaries, to make sure that you are doing those things? Because it's so easy, or I've definitely found it easy to just, you're at home and you now work at home, so you can essentially work every hour of the day, right? And your phone's always going and your email, and all those boundaries, or the boundaries you used to have, are very blurred. Yeah, so how do you go about doing that?
Well, good question. There is a woman who's out of one of the Scandinavian countries. I can't remember. Her name is Maya Droschler, and I'm probably butchering her name, but she just published this amazing article that I will republish on Twitter. I'm going to get her on my podcast. And she basically argues that working from home feels confining and stressful because our employers want it that way, because they know we're productive that way. They know exactly what's happening and they're okay with it because they've seen the benefits of it. So nobody's really giving us permission to turn off. They're paying a lot of lip service to it, but it's almost as if the system benefits from all of this chaos that we've created in our own lives. And then individuals like you and I are walking around wondering, why does everything suck? Why are we working all the time? It's because we can't help but work. The computer is right there, the phone is right there, and our employers aren't shutting off our email. They're not shutting off text messages. They're not turning off Slack. They're doing everything but solving the problem that they could very easily solve. So to blame ourselves is stupid. Let's blame our bosses. Let's blame work. I like that much more. Like, this is not our fault that we are all so burned out. This is the system. This is capitalism. So let's just do that right there and like lift some of the guilt. For me, I mean, myself, you know, people like Adam Grant, Simon Sinek, Brene Brown. I mean, I'm not of that oeuvre, but these individuals struggle as well. No one is not struggling with work-life balance right now. This is a global issue for people who are privileged enough to have this problem. And so I have gone old school, and I do a lot of time blocking. And I wrote about this, and it's in the Wall Street Journal. I will actually put a link to this on my Twitter as well. I was taught years ago that calendar management will set you free, and it's absolutely true. So on my calendar, use my morning ritual, my evening ritual, I take a lunch, I block out time for exercise, and people who like me, know me, and trust me work with me around those times. And it's not as if, you know, if the CEO of General Electric wanted to meet with me, I'm not going to blow that meeting off for Pilates. But if it's just like some HR blogger who wants to shoot the shit about Twitter, I'm going to Pilates, right? So I practice setting boundaries in the small moments to nail it in the bigger moments, because there are times when there are things I have to do, and maybe there's an inbound call that's important that I take, but I just can't take it. Even I struggle with it, but I stay true to my calendar. So this is all about practice and choices. But it starts for me with really being rigorous around calendar management. So many people are out there saying, I can't control inbound meetings and I don't have any control. Okay, if you want to continue believing that you're a victim, you can continue believing that. And it may indeed be true, but again, practice saying no in the small moments so that you can get brave in the bigger moments. That's how I do it.
I really like that. That's great. I also love living my life by my calendar, so it's great.
That's the way to do it. If we're going to be bombarded with technology, make it work for us.
Totally. The next two questions are kind of linked, but I'll ask one and the other, but there might be some crossover. So James asked, what was your take on how women's work life has been impacted by the Me Too era? Do you think it's been better or worse?
Well, you know, years ago when, in like 2017, when Me Too started to emerge as a movement that people actually knew about, it had been going on for a while, I'd written an article saying, this is not going to last. You know, like nothing ever lasts. And people were mad at me. They're like, that's not true. HR has woken up to this problem and we're now involved. And like HR is 76% women, and these women in HR are also getting sexually harassed, are also being asked to do more work than men, are also being mansplained to all the time. So I would say it was a really great movement that has not paid off. It breaks my heart. But I do think there's potential and opportunity out there for people who are brave and who are bold to set the terms and conditions of their employment a little bit differently, so that when they do encounter this, they can leave. So whether that's freelancing or consulting or working in, you know, an autonomous organization where they have a little bit more freedom, work is changing. And I think it benefits those, hopefully, who are oppressed, whether that's through sexism, racism, homophobia, ageism, ableism, all the isms. Hopefully there's more opportunity to bow out and to starve, you know, the beast that is the old system of work. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. The other one that's kind of linked, so I think that this was, so had a question come in around whether some of the themes in your book around some of the fixes and things, are you finding that that's skewed to one gender more than others, and you're finding different issues with, like, are women resonating more with the book than men, or have you had any feedback on that? So
when you write a book like this, it's interesting because my publisher told me, I want you to see your reader in your eyes. So like, close your eyes, envision this person. And I envisioned a 38-year-old sad sack white woman like me, you know, who was like struggling at work. So I envisioned basically myself, right? I wrote a book to my past version of myself. And it turns out some of the most interesting, resonant, relevant feedback I've had is from men. even though the book is as you can see behind me, if you don't have it, if you only have the e-version, is a peachy pink. It's got some gray undertones. It's very millennial driven. I've heard from older men, like men who are nearing retirement, who have said to me, if only I would have read your book 30 years ago. So I'm fascinated by that. And I think for me, some of these things that I've written about are just global truths. This idea of professional detachment, that you are not your job, appeals to everybody, not just some 38-year-old white woman in New York City. So I'm pleased about that. But the book cover, it's an interesting question because the book cover definitely lends itself to millennial women.
I think it's really interesting because I think probably the few of us that have discussed the book before are all similar age and female. So sometimes you create your own echo chamber with these things, don't you? And like one says it and the next says it and you're like, well, that must be what it's about.
Yeah, right. But it's funny because I'm part of this Gen X cohort, right? I'm 47 years old, and a lot of the people that I began working with and who are older than I am have read the book, and they're like, oh my goodness, Laurie, you're speaking to me, because they're at a position where they've been working for so long and they're just exhausted. And I'm quite pleased to hear that they still feel like they have something to contribute, but they're just burned out, and the book gave them a new perspective or new energy. So in that way, I thought, all right, it's millennial and Gen Z, but actually I have Gen Xers and boomers who find the book helpful as well. So I'm quite pleased.
I think sometimes with books as well, it's about when you read it, right? Like if you're having, if everyone here was having the best time at work and you were living your dream and living your purpose, there'd probably be no need to pick your book up, or maybe you really wouldn't resonate it in the same way, or you'd read it and just be like, oh yeah, great advice, move on. If you're really having that moment, I don't think it matters, for me anyway, like age or whatever else. It's about the time you pick any book up as to how you feel about it, I think, anyway.
I love that observation. Also, I don't feel like this is my book anymore. I read a quote from an author, and I will butcher it completely, but she's like, once I write a book, it's a moment in time, and then it gets interpreted by people, by readers, and I become one of those readers as I reread my own work, and I look for deeper meaning in it. So, I wrote this at a period of time. I turned it into my publisher it went in March of 2020. So we were at the very beginning of the pandemic. It came out 6 days after the insurrection in the United States, which is really only a year ago. I mean, time is weird right now. So I find that even I'm having a different reaction to this book a year later. I mean, it's just completely an interesting experience. One that I would have never had I stayed in human resources. So I'm quite glad to be interacting with my book that way, but it's definitely fascinating.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, enough about me being a narcissist. Let's answer some more questions.
So 2 more questions. So Dave has said, moving away from the big philosophical questions, and related to the chapter on being a slacker and work-life balance, do you think that working from home is here to stay? And do you think that the 4-day work week is going to gain momentum? Do these concepts make sense from a HR kind of general point of view?
Yeah, these concepts make a lot of sense. Individuals who work from home work harder, they work longer, which is terrible, but organizations are all about productivity and optimization in the short term, not really in the long term. And so in that way, work from home has turned out to be an economic and productivity boon for organizations. They're thrilled. And the 4-day work week, yeah, they don't give a shit about a 4-day work week. Sure, you get a 4-day work week. Are you really gonna only work 4 days? TBD. There is a marketing firm here in the United States called the Star Conspiracy, and they've been doing a 4-day work week for a while. Very successful. They do actually stick to it for the most part, and the retention rates are through the roof. And so in that way, if you can combine that 4-day work week with smart use of technology, good communication, people you trust, working with people with integrity, you can create a healthy ecosystem, and all of that can work really, really well. Do I think most companies are going to do that? No, but they'll try it. They'll pay lip service to it. And if you're a slacker like I am and your company offers a 4-day week and everybody else is working 5, I really hope you lean into those 4 days. Like, no one's going to notice. Take Friday off. You're going to be fine.
There's a recruitment company here I was chatting to last week just on the 4-day work week, and they switched to that at the start of the pandemic because it was the way that they could cut everyone's salaries but without losing staff. So as a collective, they're about 30 people. They decided that's what they'd do. And then they all started earning more money than they'd earned before because everyone was more productive in 4 days. They were earning greater commissions. So they've never gone back to a 5-day work week. But they're about the only, because there's a real talent shortage here, as there are in a lot of places, but it's hit Australia pretty bad, particularly around recruitment. They're not losing staff like everybody else is, because everyone else is, we earn less money, we work less hours. Whether that's something everyone else is then going to jump on the bandwagon with, I don't know. But for those, I guess, a bit like the Star Conspiracy, it's really worked for them as a agency and really become part of their culture and who they attract and who sticks around.
Amazing. I'm so encouraged by leaders of these smaller agencies who are setting the tone. So hopefully it's a groundswell. That's all I can hope for. So yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. And then Lorna's got another question as well. How do you end a roller coaster of emotions with work, where you're happy and satisfied 1 minute, but looking for a new opportunity the next? I love your advice around confidential job hunting in the book, but when we're working at home and consistently online, the temptation to look for new jobs on a bad day can be pretty high, because we all have those bad days, right?
Sure. I mean, I think the emotions, the roller coaster that we feel at work often don't just happen at work. They happen in our own personal lives as well. I've never met somebody who's fully happy and healthy outside of work and then a basket case at work, or someone who's nuts at work, but they've got a really great relationship with people at home, right? If you're in this kind of cycle of up and down, it's a cycle that permeates all aspects of your lives. And so for me, I would recommend, whether that's mindfulness, whether that's taking advantage of an employee assistance program, whether that's looking into some wellness programs, whatever it is you need to do to make sure that you're living a more even-keeled life so that you don't have a heart attack every time you check your email or you open your phone or whatever it is. You're not constantly in conflict with someone. Whatever you need to do to regain control, do it. And you will see benefits in both your personal and your professional life. But as to this point about job seeking, heck yeah, look for a job all the time. Why not? I look at homes all the time. I'm not going to move anytime soon. I'm constantly on a website here in the States called Zillow. I'm checking out, $5 million mansions. I'm not moving into a $5 million mansion, but it's nice to see what's out there in the marketplace. It's nice to dream a little bit. And it's also nice to be reminded of what you have. Because sometimes I look at these homes and I'm like, OMFG, they are so ugly. Who would spend that kind of money, right? And it makes me really grateful for what I have at my price point. So there is some benefit to going out there and having a look. So do it. If you want to do it, enjoy it. Make sure you're having fun with it though. Be silly. Look at all the jobs. Look at some VP jobs. Look at some entry-level jobs. Look at it all. And then, see how you feel about it. That's what I would do. I was looking at log cabins the other day. Like, why not? Check it out.
I've spent a lot of time looking at properties I can't afford this week because I just want a balcony. It's more than life. Anyway, Lorna, another one. She's like, she loved the real stories that you shared in the book. Were there any that you loved that didn't make the cut?
Oh, that's such a fun question. I wrote a whole chapter on being rejected. And they rejected that chapter. They're like, it's a little much. Because I'm kind of cynical, right? But there's a story in there where I was driving here in North Carolina and it was snowing, which is very rare. We don't get a lot of snow where I live. And I'm just curious. I'm not supposed to be out on the roads, but I'm like, I'm bored. I'm going to go driving. And as I'm driving, I see someone slip and fall and land on his back. And so I got out of my car in the snow and the ice and I helped him up and brought him into my car. And I told him, if you hurt me, I'll kill you. No, I was just I didn't want to be attacked, but I wanted to be helpful. And he looked at me, he said, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm a student. And it turns out he works at a vet school for animals here in North Carolina. And he had been working for 36 hours straight because of the weather. And he was filling in for other people's shifts. And he just didn't feel like he could say no and go home. And I think for some people like that, it can be heroic, right? During a snowstorm of epic proportion, go into work and stay in work and sleep in shifts and do all of that. That's amazing. But for people who work in human resources or marketing, that's stupid. We don't need to act like that. And yet so often we do it and we expect to be heroes. And so I tell that story and I love that young man and I'm so grateful that we met and I called the vet school and I reamed them out. you sent this poor young man home in the snow. You couldn't even offer him a ride. I was so upset about the whole thing, and they listened and they took the feedback, and they were very grateful he stayed, but they realized they weren't looking out for his best interests. So yeah, that was one of my favorite stories.
Oh, wow, that's huge. I think we'd all like to read the chapter on rejection if you want to, put it online at some point. Okay, we've had one more question come in, but if anyone else has got any questions, now's your time to raise your hand or pop them in. Laura's asked if there was just one thing that you had to take from the book and there was just one takeaway, what would you want people to take away?
Yeah, that's a great question. Super philosophical as well. I write this in the book that your work is not your worth. I mean it. You deserve love and attention and food and shelter and an education and all the good stuff just because you were born. You should be entitled to that. You should be given that. And the fact that we don't do that is a crime, which is why I write about concepts like universal basic income and really rethinking compensation, because the way we currently pay people and reward people and educate people in this world is so broken. So your work is not your worth is one of these guiding principles I have in my own life. When, I have a week where I've only sold 37 books, I'm like, what the hell? And then I'm like, I'm pretty awesome anyway. Like, doesn't matter how many books I sold. What an honor to say that people in Australia, New Zealand, and Montana, and the UK, and now Brazil are reading my book. I mean, it's awesome. And also, who cares, because I'm loved, and I also take care of the animals in my life, and I'm a good sister and a good companion and a good friend. Those are the things that are important. So your work is not your worth.
I think that's perfect. I think we all need that on a sign somewhere in our home offices now. Lorna has just raised her hand, so I'm going to unmute her again.
Do it.
I say that. I think I did it too quickly and then muted it straight away. There we go. Lorna, you should be good.
Thank you. She wasn't joking at the beginning when she said I had a lot of questions, so apologies for my name popping up so much. But I guess when you probably started writing the book, it would have been either very early days of COVID or pre-COVID. I'm just wondering if there's anything in there that you've kind of changed your perspective on, or it's only got higher, of a bigger issue since the impact of COVID, and if that's kind of changing over time, because obviously the world's just changing every year or every month really at the moment. So is there anything that in the book now that you reflect on it, you think actually that's slightly different now?
Yeah, when I wrote the book, I told you I had the core reader in mind, which was this, white woman from New York City who hated her job. And, luckily I was able to, just in my normal way of writing, write in a more inclusive way, hopefully, that goes beyond this white woman. And there are references in the book, before this was a big thing, to racial justice, to social justice, to a lot of that. There are these moments in the book. I think if I were writing now, I would write more about that and write more about some of the good things that I've actually seen people within corporations do to make sure that they're opening doors to being more inclusive, to listening differently, to really changing the world of work in a positive way. So the book came out just a little too early to include any sort of case studies. And I actually had an opportunity to go back. They were like, do you want to write anything about like what happened here in America with George Floyd? And I thought that would seem a little awkward and also a little obvious to go back and insert some pieces in. So I opted not to do that and just had hoped that my heart showed that I cared about those issues. But had I had an extra 6 months, I would have written more, I think, about that.
I think like the principles still stand, right? Like everything in the book is still makes sense. And I think we're all so used to adapting everything to current ways of working, whatever that looks like from one week to the next. So yeah, I absolutely think everything still makes so much sense in today's world. And I can see why you wouldn't want to go back, because then you could just keep going back every few months to change it again. So where would you draw the line?
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough that the book came out in hardcover and then it came out in paperback almost a year to the day later. And they keep telling me it's an honor, but it feels like I have yet another thing to sell, And so I'm like, okay, it's a great honor. But in an age of, inflation and restricted goods and access, right? And supply chain issues, it is absolutely an honor. And they asked, is there anything about the book you want to change? And it just felt too soon to do like a completely revised edition. And if we wanted to make the January deadline of the paperback, I said, no, let's just keep it the same. But going forward, I think there's an opportunity to really explore, you know, what does this look like in 5 years? What does this look like in 10 years? So for me, kind of revisiting these themes, even if it's not in the Betting on You framework, is something that I want to do. I'm thinking about my next book, in fact, which will probably be published in 2024. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I would like to write about the world of work. But what we're thinking about right now with work, especially here in the States, are a lot of issues around addiction and hopelessness and despair. And so that's what I would like to focus on. So that's what I think my next book will be. But of course, I'm going to pull in the history of Betting on You into that book. So I don't know. If anybody wants to talk to me about like addiction at work, their own stories, I would be honored to hear those stories. So please connect with me on LinkedIn and maybe we can have a chat about that. I'd love to hear, especially stories about recovery. I think that's really important.
That's awesome. We look forward to that book in 2024, which will be here before we know it. So no pressure. Like, even the year was 2022, I had to write the date the other day. I was like, oh my God, how did that happen?
Oh, and it's February already. I hate that.
Yeah. Just had a question via text come in. He said, I feel like we're at a time where a lot of people are waking up to self-care. In brackets, it feels like a lot of us had to hit 30 before that happened. But we have some leaders that are still a little bit old school and have the view that you should be grateful for the work that you have, and that there's a real pride in not having sick days. How do we take some of this into work without seeing like the hippie or the slacker?
Well, I mean, we're in a really interesting age where if you're working for someone who has those feelings and that sentiment, you can quit. Like maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you don't have to work there. Like vote with your feet. Isn't that what capitalism is all about? Like when we don't like a brand, we stop using that brand. We stop shopping at a store. We stop wearing that clothing line. Why wouldn't we stop working at a place that thinks self-care is for hippies and slackers? And also, it's okay to be a hippie and a slacker. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. They live pretty good lives. They're happier than we are. So I would share that perspective. Also, you can engage in self-care without telling anybody about it. Like a lot of people feel like, you know, they have a self-care day, they get a massage, or you know, they take the day off and they just want to talk about it. You don't have to talk about it. You could just enjoy that for yourself. And in that way, create your own delineation between work and life, like model that behavior in your own life. You don't have to tell people why you're taking a day off. You don't have to give them an explanation. You can just take the day off straight away and leave it at that. So I would encourage you to set some boundaries of your own. And if your boss has any questions about what you did and you know he wouldn't approve, just lie to him. You know, oh, I had a doctor's appointment, or oh, I had to, you know, tutor my child, whatever it is. You don't have to tell the truth. You don't owe that to anybody. So do what you want, when you want, on demand and without apology. Your PTO is part of your compensation plan. So take it, don't waste it. That's what I say. I don't know. Laura, what do you think?
I think we've all had that boss. And I think, to be honest, for me, it's something that's come with age, because I think I probably would have just in my 20s just been told that I was very grateful for a job, particularly, you know, in Australia, we all kept, or a lot of us, I say all because I know who asked that question, we're all here on visas. So if we didn't have our, not only did we lose our job, we also had to leave the country. And that becomes a whole different, but now, no, I think I just do as I please and just be like, my work's great, you love it or you don't. But that's taken, you know, 12, 13 years.
I also think there's this old sentiment, there's this old way of living, you know, whether you're in the UK or in Australia, there's just this old attitude around work. And I'm going to say this, and I don't mean this in a seriously negative way, but that's going to die off at some point. And the more we can do to create a generation of people who actually enjoy taking time off and taking time away from work, the better off we're going to be. So while we do have to pay lip service to that older generation that's still in power, they're not going to be in power forever. And I think, you know, that's why the question early on around mentorship is so important. You don't have to wait to be old to mentor. You know, if you're in your 30s and you don't like work, grab somebody who's 22 years old and train them early. You know, like do your job and do it well. Create that next generation of people who actually enjoy taking a day off and don't feel bad about it. So yeah.
I think it goes back to your point about mentorship though. I think people look at it really traditionally, or in my head, that, you know, you've got this 22-year-old that gets mentored by a 40-year-old, and it's the 40-year-old that's giving this 22-year-old. And it's not. It's such a two-way value exchange for how the younger generation are looking at things. And I think that's when you can get these ideas around kind of, you know, self-care, or maybe things that seem a little bit more new, kind of going further up the chain, and changing people's opinions on it slightly.
I also, I just have to say, this idea of mentorship in general is so, because it's so formal, it just stops us at the gate of what we should be doing anyway, which is helping one another and teaching one another. Like, this does not have to be a thing. You know, people teach me stuff all the time. I don't care how old they are. Just fix me, help me, you know, address my deficiencies. If you see me doing something stupid, correct me, you know, like, it doesn't really matter. And I just, I think work has created this formality that is just so artificial, and we break it down just by breathing, relaxing, and ignoring it, you know? So if you see someone who needs a little coaching or advice, take that opportunity if they trust you and you trust them to do it. Don't worry about whether or not there's a formal relationship.
Yeah, totally. I think Laura's got her hand up again. So let me just unmute.
Forgive me, I'm just guzzling water as we talk. So.
Hey, sorry to jump back in. I can't help myself. There's too much good discussion happening. I just wanted to kind of build on that last conversation we were having about kind of the generations and old school thinking. I think, you know, personally, obviously you've got a few Brits on this call. I know personally some of that comes from our upbringing as well, and that real sense of kind of pride. I know I used to take real pride, you know, even a couple of years ago, and sometimes it creeps back in kind of saying, you know, yeah, I would never have a day off work. You know, unless my leg's falling off, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to be there. And you know, who's actually the real winner in that? Who's actually benefiting from that attitude? And I think some of that pride and that attitude kind of comes from our parents, and it kind of can creep back in, and it's tough to remind yourself or stop and kind of remind yourself what's actually really important. So it's not always necessarily, I think, the kind of monster CEOs or you know, grey-haired leaders that are the ones that are doing it to us. It's actually ourselves, because we're in that in-between generation as well. I love the idea as well about kind of taking hold of somebody younger than you as well, and really confirming actually that self-care is okay, and then making sure that it carries through the generations. So thanks for that. It's a great idea.
Well, and thank you for reminding us all that we have the power to correct stories that we're telling ourselves. You know, I write about that in the book all the time. I was showing up for a job that nobody was really asking me to work all that hard at, and I was pouring my heart and soul into it, and I didn't like it, and nobody really liked me towards the end of it. And I'm like, why am I doing this? You know, and it turns out I was caught up in these stories in my head around having to earn a certain amount of money, and having to look a certain way, and having to drive a certain car, and, you know, live in a certain neighborhood. Like, I had all of these things I was doing to myself that perpetuated this idea that I had to work so hard. And once I started to work on some of the things that were broken within me, the way I saw myself, the way I didn't care for my physical well-being, the way my physical well-being was secondary to the demands of my job, right? Once I started kind of investing back in myself, going back and looking at childhood trauma, to your point, all of that hippie shitty stuff I didn't want to do, when I finally started to do it, it paid dividends, not only in my personal life, but in my career as well. So that's a really great point around, it's not always your boss that's the arbiter of terrible self-care habits. Sometimes it's just you and the expectations you put on yourself. So thank you for that reminder. But some of these old people are driving me crazy. I will say that. My father-in-law used to say, a job worth doing is a job worth doing well. And I agree. I think that's absolutely right. But nobody does a job well when they're working 60 hours a week, or 70 or 80. I mean, it doesn't happen. So until we break that connection, that conflation between quantity and quality, we're never going to get anywhere in this world.
That's true. Okay, guys, it's 8 minutes left. There aren't any other questions, so I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to cover, Laurie, that we haven't. I know we've gone from big philosophical questions to other things, but if there was anything else before we let everyone go.
Well, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to talk to everybody. And for those of you who are watching the recording and didn't get a chance to ask a question, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be sharing some resources on Twitter as well. But there are really 4 key themes in the book, and I just wanted to make sure I covered them. And I think we talked about all of them. But the first is this idea of self-leadership, which we were just talking about, that no cavalry is coming to save you, especially if you work in human resources, but really anybody, that the only person who can save you from a terrible job, a terrible life, is you. And that's not me, that's Barack Obama, that's Nelson Mandela, that's, you know, Buddha. These are old concepts around self-leadership, the art and science of individual accountability. The second concept in the book is well-being, and we've talked a lot about that. Physical, emotional, financial well-being is the core to not only doing great work, but living a great life. And the third thing, we haven't talked about this very much, but is continuous learning. That's a huge theme throughout the book, because when you're learning, you're growing. And when you're growing, you're thriving. And that's the point of life. If you're not thriving, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you doing anything? It's time to thrive. We all survived a pandemic to thrive. And then the fourth component of the book, the fourth major theme, is around risk management and this idea that we can take risks, but we can do it in a better way using the pre-mortem, that tool that we talked about a little earlier. So those are the 4 themes that I covered in my book without using any bullet points. I don't know if you noticed that. And I also don't have any 2x2 quadrants, which every HR consultant does. And I challenged myself not to put a 2x2 quadrant in the book, and I didn't. So I'm real proud of that. And I'm just so honored that all y'all would buy the book, read the book, listen to the book. It's just so awesome to connect with you. So make sure you say hi, and hopefully I'll see everybody. If you're in the States and you're in North Carolina, say hello. And you know, if I'm in Australia or New Zealand or anywhere on that side of the world, I will say hi as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for today. It's been brilliant. Thank you to everyone for coming along and the great questions. And we'll probably all be back here in 2024 when that new book's released.